The day a judge ordered my husband and his mother out of my apartment, they both acted like they were the ones being robbed. Ryan's face went purple as he shouted about rights and marital property, while Linda clutched her pearls and told the court I had tricked her precious son. I just sat there, fingers digging into the wood of the bench, listening as the judge repeated the same sentence. This property belongs solely to Mrs. Emily Parker. Solely. Before I ever met Ryan. Before his mother ever tracked muddy footprints across my living room. They thought marriage was their shortcut to everything I'd worked for. But what they didn't know was that my biggest lie was the only thing keeping me safe. Before I go any further, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever had someone smile at you while quietly plotting to take everything you built. Trust me, this story goes places I never imagined living through. You'll want to stay with me for this. I didn't grow up dreaming about owning property. I grew up dreaming about escaping rent hikes, escaping cramped apartments, escaping the feeling of never belonging anywhere. Maybe that's why when I turned 25 and landed my first real job at a mid-sized marketing agency in Seattle, I worked like my life depended on it. Because in a way it did. My first winter there, the office lights stayed on long after everyone else had gone home. The hum of the old HVAC system, the faint smell of coffee burned hours ago, and the tapping of my keyboard became the soundtrack of my nights. Outside, Seattle rain streaked the windows in silver lines, turning the world blurry. Inside, I sat hunched over my tablet, drawing mock-ups until my fingers cramped. Coworkers joked that I was married to the job, but they didn't know the truth. This wasn't ambition. This was survival. I ate dollar store ramen. I walked to work to save on bus fare. I saved every freelance check every holiday, bonus every cent that didn't need to be spent. When my friends invited me on weekend trips or beach vacations, I typed back the same line every time next time. I'm saving for something bigger. I didn't tell them what the something was because I didn't quite believe it myself yet. One night, after a 14-hour day that left my vision fuzzy, a coworker leaned on my cubicle wall and said, "Emily, you're going to burn out before you even turn 30. I smiled, pretending it didn't sting. I didn't bother explaining. People who always had a safety net could never understand the pressure of having none. But something did change that year. My parents praised my little sister constantly, her college awards, her new friends, her pretty Instagram photos while brushing off my accomplishments like they were chores. And I swallowed it every time. I swallowed it at birthdays, at Thanksgiving dinners, at graduations where I sat in the second row holding a camera for someone else. I hadn't realized how familiar swallowing disappointment had become. Maybe that's why buying the apartment felt like reclaiming oxygen. I still remember stepping into the real estate office, shaking hands with Mark, the same Mark who would someday help me expose my husband, and sitting down with a folder of documents so thick it felt like a weapon. My palms were sweaty. My signature looked shaky on every page. When Mark slid the final document across the desk, he said, "Congratulations, you're officially a homeowner." The sentence didn't feel real until I walked into my new living room. It was empty. The hardwood floors echoed under my boots. The afternoon sun came through the windows in warm, golden sheets. Dust floated in the light like confetti. I sat on the floor and felt something in my chest loosen a knot I didn't know I'd been carrying for years. I cried until my breath turned into hiccups, until the fear of never enough finally cracked open. What I didn't know then was that this apartment would one day become a battlefield. The shift came slowly. The week after I moved in, relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly thought of me. A cousin asked if she could crash for a weekend that somehow sounded like a month. An aunt suggested I rent the second bedroom to family first. A friend from college wanted a loan to help her start a business she'd never planned. I said no to everyone. There was one relative, an older cousin, who tried convincing me to put his name on a refinance application for better rates. That was the day a new rule carved itself into my bones: no one touches my property. No one. I didn't know that rule would someday save my life. Around this time, Zoe and I became close. We'd met in college, but adulthood had pulled us in different directions until she moved to Seattle for her law job. We started meeting once a week at a tiny diner with flickering neon lights and coffee that tasted like burnt toast. She'd show up in crisp blazer's hair in a tight ponytail, looking like she was ready to cross-examine the waiter. I used to tease her for being intense. She teased me for being too soft-hearted. You bought a whole condo at 28, she'd say, stabbing her fork into her hash browns. Software, exactly. She was the only person I trusted enough to tell about the apartment, and she was the only one who said the words that would echo years later. Separate property is your shield. Don't forget that. I didn't know then how right she'd be. 2 months after buying the apartment on a rainy Tuesday morning, the type Seattle is famous for, I met Ryan. It wasn't romantic at first. It was just warm. I was standing at this counter of a coffee shop waiting for a latte they'd forgotten, half asleep, hair frizzing from the damp air. Then a man with blonde hair, blue eyes, and a too charming smile leaned toward me and said, "Pretty sure they ghosted your drink. Want me to remind them?" He did an exaggerated impression of the stressed-out barista that made me snort laugh so loud people turned to look. He wasn't like the guys I'd dated before. He was funny, confident, talkative, easy to be around in a way that felt like sunlight after a long winter. When he asked for my number, I said yes without thinking. I didn't know it then, but that yes would rewrite my entire life. Ryan swept me into a whirlwind of dates and promises. He texted me good morning every day, sent voice notes telling me he missed me, talked about futures filled with houses and road trips and kids with his blue eyes. He made me feel chosen in a way I had rarely felt growing up. But even then, red flags fluttered at the edge of my vision. A forgotten wallet here, a card decline there. Stories about big commissions this close to landing deals just around the corner. I ignored all of it. Because after years of swallowing disappointment, I didn't know how to stop craving validation. I didn't know that each red flag was a breadcrumb leading straight into hell. The first time Ryan visited my apartment, he stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, eyes wide. "Wow," he breathed. "Nice place for a rental." A tiny jab pierced my ribs. Not because he assumed it was a rental, I'd let him believe that, but because of the tone, admiration mixed with entitlement, like he was already imagining where he'd put his things. Still, I smiled. "Yeah, I got lucky." He walked through the room, slowly touching surfaces, peeking into corners, noticing the good lighting, the clean floors, the quiet neighborhood, the things I'd spent 3 years earning. He didn't know that the couch had taken me 3 months of freelance work, that the plants by the window had been my first luxury purchase in years, that the framed prints on the wall were my own artwork, pieces of myself I'd placed where they could breathe. Back then, I thought his curiosity meant he was impressed. Now I know it was the first spark of calculation. Still, I drowned the discomfort. That became my habit with Ryan. Any uneasy feeling, any small sign, I buried under affection or excuses. It was a kind of emotional muscle memory. 8 months into dating, he introduced me to his mother. Dinner at a high-end restaurant on the waterfront. Dim lights, piano music. Servers in black vests moving like shadows. I spent half the afternoon picking out an outfit that wasn't too casual, wasn't too formal. My palms were sweaty the whole Uber ride there. Linda arrived 10 minutes late in a swirl of perfume and diamonds. She kissed Ryan on the cheek, glanced at me with polite disinterest, and immediately launched into a monologue about real estate markets and wealth-building opportunities. She spoke with confidence, but everything she said was either exaggerated or wrong, and Ryan nodded at each sentence like it was gospel. When she finally turned to me, she didn't ask what I liked or who I was. She asked numbers. How much do you make? Does your company match your 401k? How much do you have saved? Do your parents have assets? It felt less like dinner and more like an interview to join her corporation. Ryan didn't step in, not once. If anything, he looked proud, like his mother's approval was the ultimate currency. Later, Zoe asked me what Linda was like, and I tried to soften it. She's meticulous. Zoe raised an eyebrow. Meticulous like a surgeon or meticulous like a vulture? I didn't answer. Around this time, Ryan started talking about our future with increasing specificity. Our house someday, our kids, our dream life. There was something seductive about it. I'd spent so long planning alone that being included in someone else's plans felt intoxicating. But I never mentioned the apartment. Every time the opportunity came, something in my gut whispered, "Not yet. Don't hand this over." The longer I kept the secret, the heavier it felt. But so did the idea of revealing it. And that's how secrets trap you, between a truth that feels dangerous and a lie that feels safer. When Ryan proposed, I said yes. Candles, roses, a ring that sparkled too brightly for a man always between jobs. My heart raced with joy and fear tangled together. I told Zoe the next day. She nearly choked on her coffee. You're engaged to a man you don't trust with your biggest asset. I do trust him, I insisted. I just haven't figured out how to bring it up. She leaned in, eyes sharp. If you're hiding that apartment to protect him, that's love. If you're hiding it to protect yourself, that's survival. I didn't respond because she was right and I didn't want to face it. The wedding came fast, too fast in hindsight. White flowers everywhere. A venue overlooking the water. A 5-tier cake Linda insisted on because it photographed well. Her approval mattered more to her than the marriage itself. I paid for almost everything. Out of pocket. Quietly. When Ryan asked, "How did your parents afford this?" I smiled and lied. They saved up. I thought it was harmless. But looking back, that lie became the foundation of a house of cards. 3 days after the wedding, we returned to my apartment. Our apartment now in Ryan's eyes. We walked in and he looked around with a strange, assessing expression. Then he kissed my forehead and said, "Once we sell this place, we'll have a great down payment for something better. Sell." The word hit me like cold water. "You can't sell a rental," I said carefully. He laughed. "Oh, babe, we'll figure it out." Something inside me tightened, a thread starting to strain. The next morning, I told myself I'd imagined it. That newlyweds say thoughtless things sometimes. That stress makes people careless. But then came the phone call at work. I was designing a logo under a tight deadline when my phone buzzed. Ryan's name flashed. I answered expecting something small. "Hey babe," he said casually. "Mom's having financial trouble." I told her she could stay with us a while. My hand froze on the mouse. Stay? With us. For how long, I don't know. Just until she gets back on her feet. She's already on her way. Already. As if I didn't live there too. I remember staring at my screen, the bright colors of the logo blurring into nonsense. My heartbeat was loud enough to drown out the office noise. When I walked into my apartment that evening, everything felt wrong. Linda's luggage blocked the entry. My plants were gone. The artwork I'd made my artwork was removed from the walls. The rug replaced. The couch moved. Like someone had performed surgery on my home without anesthesia. Linda turned toward me and smiled like a queen, greeting a servant. "Oh, good you're home. I rearranged things. You had the place looking juvenile." Something in my chest cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet fracture. But the moment that carved itself into my memory was the one that came next. Week later, I came home early and paused in the hallway. Voices drifted from the kitchen, Ryan and Linda. "Linda, you need to establish financial control now before she thinks she has equal say." Ryan. "She'll agree eventually. We'll flip this place and get something better." Flip. As if my home were a pawn in their game. I stood frozen behind the wall, hands trembling. That was the moment everything changed. And I remember thinking with terrifying clarity, this isn't marriage. This is a takeover. I didn't say anything that night, but it was the last time I swallowed the hurt. I didn't know what the fight would cost me. I didn't know how ugly it would get. But I knew one thing: I wasn't giving them my home. Not without a war. If I had known how fast peace can rot into chaos, I would have cherished those 3 quiet honeymoon days harder. But by the end of the first week of marriage, the air inside my apartment felt different. Thicker, heavier tinted with someone else's perfume and someone else's expectations. Linda began her invasion with a smile. On her second morning in my apartment, I found her standing in my kitchen wearing silk pajamas, sipping from the mug my best friend Zoe had bought me for my 28th birthday. She pointed at the fridge. "I threw out all that processed food, honey. It's terrible for Ryan. We'll grocery shop later." My jaw nearly dropped. Not because she'd thrown out my groceries, though that was bad enough, but because she'd said for Ryan, as if I were incidental and extra in my own life. Ryan wandered out moments later, shirtless, hair messy, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Hey, babe," he murmured, kissing my cheek. Mom made coffee. I stared at the pot. The smell was too strong, too bitter. She'd used twice the grounds. It didn't matter. Nothing about the apartment felt like mine anymore. That weekend, the 3 of us sat down for what Linda called a family budget meeting. I hadn't agreed to it. She just printed spreadsheets on my printer and set them neatly on the coffee table. Ryan flipped through his pages, nodding along as Linda lectured. "You two need to think long term. You're throwing money away on this rental. Once you buy, everything changes." I kept my voice steady. We're not discussing buying anything until we're both financially ready. Linda didn't look at me, she looked at Ryan. She's nervous because she doesn't understand wealth building yet. My throat tightened. Ryan didn't correct her. That silence cut deeper than any insult. Over the next days, the apartment transformed again. My cozy yellow lamp was replaced with a harsh white LED because it's better for the eyes. My soft throw blankets were stuffed into a closet. My plants disappeared, entirely dumped, I later learned, because Linda didn't believe in mess. I came home one evening and found Linda rearranging the living room furniture again. The couch was shoved against the window, the rug rolled up. My art prints stacked carelessly by the trash. These don't match the aesthetic, she said without looking up. The aesthetic of what I asked, stunned. Ours, she said sweetly. Our future home layout. Ryan needs an environment that reflects his ambitions. I wanted to scream. Instead, I inhaled slowly and exhaled through my teeth. It didn't matter. Linda saw my silence as permission. Meanwhile, Ryan became someone I barely recognized. He began correcting me constantly. If I asked about a bill, you're overthinking. If I said I felt overwhelmed, you're too emotional. If I questioned any decision he made with Linda, you need to respect my mother. One night, I cooked dinner salmon, roasted potatoes, asparagus. My grandmother's recipe. Linda took one bite, pursed her lips, and said, "It's a little bland, sweetheart. Ryan prefers more seasoning." Ryan nodded without tasting anything. "Then maybe Mom can teach you a bit. She's great in the kitchen." My chest burned. I put down my fork. Linda is a guest, not my teacher. Ryan's eyes flashed. "Don't start. Not in front of my mother. Not in front of my mother." The phrase became his favorite weapon. The emotional erosion continued subtly at first. Small criticisms. Short sighs when I didn't understand something immediately. Mocking jokes said with a smile so others wouldn't notice the sting. Then came the day that nearly broke me. I opened the mailbox after work and found a bank statement, addressed to me, torn open. I rushed upstairs, heart pounding. Linda was in the living room, calmly folding laundry that wasn't hers. "Did you open my mail?" I demanded. She blinked innocently. "Oh, that was yours. I thought it was something for the household." "You really shouldn't leave important financial documents lying around. That's illegal," I said, shaking. "Don't touch my mail again." Linda raised her eyebrows. "Sweetheart, if we're family, why are you being so dramatic, family?" The word tasted sour. Ryan came home minutes later. I told him what happened. He shrugged. "She was just curious. What's the big deal?" "The big deal," I snapped, "is that she saw my savings." Linda's eyes gleamed with something that made my stomach twist. Impressive amount, by the way. Didn't realize renters could save like that. Renters. The lie I had allowed them to believe. My one attempt to protect myself. Now turned into ammunition. That night, Ryan slid into bed beside me and said, "You know, moving into a smaller place temporarily might help us save even more." Mom thinks I sat up. Stop. Stop saying, "Mom thinks." This is our marriage, not hers. Ryan's jaw tightened. Don't disrespect her. She's trying to help. Help with what I asked. With stealing my home. His eyes narrowed. What did you just say? The fear in my chest hardened into something sharper, anger, survival, clarity. But I didn't answer. Because at that moment I didn't have enough proof. Not yet. 2 days later the proof came crashing down on me. I got home early, headache, exhaustion, the whole day a blur. I opened the door quietly and heard voices from the kitchen. Ryan and Linda, whispering. I stepped closer, hidden behind the hallway wall. "Linda, she's too attached to this place. You need to make her think it's temporary. Once we get her out, we'll talk to the landlord. Offer something low since you already live here." Ryan, I know, Mom, but she's stubborn. Linda, then you push harder. Establish control now before she gets comfortable. Marriage is about hierarchy. Hierarchy. The word stabbed me. Ryan chuckled. She'll agree eventually. Women always do once you explain it right. My vision blurred. My knees nearly buckled. I covered my mouth so they wouldn't hear my breath break. In that moment, the world split open. Everything I'd tried to rationalize, every excuse I'd made for Ryan, every apology I'd made on Linda's behalf, shattered. I slipped out of the apartment and sat in my car, shaking so violently I could barely hold my phone. I called Zoe. She answered immediately. What happened?" I told her. Every word, every sentence like pulling glass out of my throat. Zoe's voice turned razor sharp. You need to document everything. Don't confront them yet. Let them show their full hand. I wiped tears with the back of my hand. He's my husband, Zoe. And you're his target, she said without hesitation. He's using marriage as leverage. Remember what I told you. Separate property is your shield. I sat there long after we hung up, staring at the apartment windows glowing warm against the night sky. My home, my one safe place, now poisoned. Over the next week, the harassment escalated in ways so subtle and cruel that I almost doubted my reality. Linda started inviting her friends over for lunch without telling me. I'd walk in to find strangers sitting at my table sipping iced tea, admiring the apartment as if it were already hers. "Oh, we're just showing them potential renovation ideas," Linda said casually once. Potential renovations for a home she didn't own. Ryan, meanwhile, began policing my tone, my expression, my boundaries. If I asked for space, "Why are you cold?" If I tried working late, "You're avoiding us." If I questioned anything, "Stop being dramatic." One night, Linda told Ryan loudly enough for me to hear, "She's not contributing enough. She needs to step up." I nearly laughed. I paid every bill except Ryan's car payment. But Ryan nodded. "I'll talk to her." Talk turned into pressure. Pressure turned into threats disguised as concern. "You want us to succeed, right? You're making things harder than they need to be. Just trust me. Trust him." The same man who was planning to flip my home like a cheap investment property. Zoe came by one evening with groceries and documents. She walked through the door, stopped mid-step and whispered, "This place feels different." "It's not mine anymore," I whispered back. Zoe cupped my face. "Then we take it back." But before we could take anything back, things got worse. Much worse. It started when my favorite sweater disappeared from the laundry room. Then another shirt. Then a pair of jeans. At first I thought maybe I'd misplaced them. Laundry can get mixed up. But when a delicate blouse I'd bought with my first freelance paycheck vanished, I knew. Linda. I found a scrap of the blouse, a single thread sticking out of a black trash bag in the hallway. When I confronted her, she shrugged. "I thought it was old. You dress so simply. I assumed you wouldn't mind." Ryan overheard and sided with her. "Why are you so attached to things? It's childish." Things. He meant pieces of my life. He meant pieces he intended to replace. I started storing important belongings in my car, my laptop, my documents, my jewelry, the notebook with the original sketches for my first clients, the essentials of my identity. Because inside my own home, nothing felt safe. But the breaking point came the night Ryan tried to change the locks. I pulled into the parking lot and saw a white van with 24-hour locksmith painted on the side. Panic bloomed like wildfire. I ran upstairs. The locksmith was kneeling by my door, tools spread out. Ryan stood over him, arms crossed, looking smug. "What are you doing?" I demanded. Ryan shrugged. "I'm protecting our home. I don't trust you not to lock me out." "Our home," he said, as if speaking it made it true. I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling the police." Ryan's smirk vanished. "You're calling the cops on your husband, yes," I said, voice trembling. "On anyone who tries to take what's mine." The police arrived faster than I expected, 2 officers, one male, one female, climbing the hallway stairs with steady, echoing footsteps. The locksmith immediately stepped back, hands raised like he'd walked into a crime scene by mistake. "Ma'am, is this your residence?" the female officer asked. I pulled up the deed on my phone with shaking fingers. "Yes, I own this apartment. He's trying to change the locks without my consent." Ryan scoffed. "She's my wife. This is our marital home. I have every right." The male officer cut him off. "Sir, unless your name is on the deed, which it isn't, you cannot change the locks. Step away from the door." The flicker of humiliation in Ryan's eyes was volcanic. Linda stepped into the hallway, then wearing one of my robes as if she needed a final insult, and snapped, "This is ridiculous. She's overreacting as always. Officers, can't you see she's emotionally unstable?" Emotionally unstable. The oldest trick in the book attacked the woman's sanity, but the officers ignored her. The locksmith packed up in awkward silence, mumbling, "I don't get paid enough for this," as he hurried past us. When the police finally left, Ryan didn't yell. I saw something far worse in his expression, quiet calculation. "You embarrassed me," he said softly, too softly. Then he closed the bedroom door so gently it felt like a threat. That night, I slept with my car keys in my hand. I should have left then. I know that. But leaving your own home feels like losing, and I had already lost too much ground. The next morning, a letter arrived from Victor Blake, Linda's cousin, the divorce attorney known for his brutality. Zoe had warned me about him. Rumors said he once dragged a custody battle on for 18 months just to force the mother into bankruptcy. I opened the envelope at the kitchen counter while Ryan watched from the hallway. The letter was filled with legal jargon dripping with intimidation. Failure to share marital assets, abandonment of spousal responsibilities, potential liability for spousal support. At the bottom, Mrs. Parker may be in violation of marital transparency laws. A complete lie, a manipulation. But my hands still shook. But when I looked up, Linda was smirking behind her mug. Just business, sweetheart, nothing personal. Zoe arrived an hour later, hair pulled back tight, expression sharp enough to cut glass. She scanned the letter once. This is garbage. Empty threats. But they're escalating, Emily. You can't keep living like this. I know, I whispered. But what do I do? Zoe put her laptop on the table. We build a case. Document everything. Every insult, every violation, every threat. And then, we get them out legally. I felt the weight of it, how big the fight would be, how ugly it would turn. But there was no other option. Because the next day, Linda invited people over again, women from some social club she belonged to. They wandered through my apartment like prospective buyers, complimenting the lovely bones of the place and suggesting renovations. This kitchen would be perfect with marble counters, one said. Once they own it, of course, another added, laughing. I stood in the hallway, unseen, listening to them envision a future that erased me entirely. That night, I confronted Ryan. Stop letting your mother bring strangers into my home. He didn't look up from his phone. Our home. It is not your home, I said sharply. You don't pay for anything here. That got his attention. His head snapped up. Don't talk to me like I'm worthless. I didn't say worthless, I said. But you haven't contributed financially. At all. His voice dropped, dangerous. What I contribute is stability, leadership. That's what a husband does. I stared at him, stunned. Leadership, I echoed. By stealing my privacy, by letting your mother run my life. He stood abruptly, knocking a chair over. My mother is helping us, something you clearly don't appreciate. Linda stepped into the doorway, then arms crossed. He shouldn't have to defend his family to you. Family. Again, a word used as a knife. The fight escalated until Ryan finally shouted, You owe us transparency. You owe us respect. I whispered, I owe you nothing you've tried to take. He lunged forward, as if he'd say more, maybe worse, but Linda grabbed his arm. Not yet, she murmured to him. Not yet. As if the real attack was coming. And she was right. Because the next morning, 3 noise complaints were slipped under my door. All from neighbors Linda had talked to. All fabricated. It was meant to create a paper trail painting me as the disruptive one. Then food began disappearing from the fridge. My favorite coffee beans, leftovers from restaurants, a half-eaten chocolate bar Zoe had brought me. Each time I opened the fridge, there was less of me left in that kitchen. Then came the nights of deliberate sabotage. Music, loud thumping, vibrating the walls, blasted from the living room. At 1 a.m., I'd stumble out exhausted. Ryan would say, Mom can't sleep without background noise. At 2 a.m., Linda would slam cabinets. At 3 a.m., I'd hear giggling. At 4 a.m., the microwave door slamming shut. They were wearing me down, breaking me inch by inch. One night at 4:12 a.m., I heard a gentle knock on my door. Arthur, my elderly neighbor, stood there holding a notebook. I'm so sorry, he whispered, but I can hear everything. I've been hearing everything for weeks. His voice trembled slightly. My wife. She went through something similar. Psychological warfare. I didn't protect her then. I'd like to help you now. He held up the notebook. Dates, times, descriptions. Documenting the noise, the fights, the cruelty. I nearly cried. Someone saw me. Someone believed me. Thank you, and I whispered. He patted my hand. They're bullies. Bullies don't stop until someone stronger steps in. And then something happened that proved just how deep Ryan and Linda's desperation ran. Zoe, while digging into public records, uncovered a piece of Ryan's past he'd never told me. Eviction. A woman he'd lived with years before had taken him to small claims court for unpaid rent. He'd charmed her, lived off her income, run up her bills, then disappeared when she confronted him. Zoe showed me the documents, sliding them across my kitchen table like evidence in a murder trial. You didn't marry a romantic, she said quietly. You married a pattern. I stared at the papers, my heart breaking in a way that felt oddly cleansing. Truth hurts, but lies rot from the inside. After that night, I stopped being afraid of losing the marriage. I started being afraid of keeping it. The breaking point came 3 days later. I was working from home, headphones in, when Linda barged into my office without knocking. Good news, she chirped. I spoke to a realtor friend. He's coming tomorrow to appraise the apartment. I blinked, stunned. What? Why? To get an idea of what we'll offer the landlord. She said breezily. Obviously, we'll negotiate low because you've kept the place in, well, decent condition. I stood up so fast my chair hit the wall. You had no right. She rolled her eyes. You're so territorial. It's not healthy. Once the place is in our name, you'll relax. Our name. They already believed it was theirs. When Ryan got home, he confirmed it. It's just an appraisal. Don't be dramatic. Mark's a friend of Mom's. It'll help us plan. Plan what? The theft of my life. That evening, when Ryan and Linda went out to pick up dinner, I searched the kitchen counter until I found the card Linda had left there. A business card. Mark Henson, realtor. I dialed the number before I could second-guess myself. He answered on the second ring, voice gruff and sleepy. Henson. Mr. Henson, I whispered. This is the owner of the apartment you're supposed to appraise tomorrow. I need to tell you something before you come. I explained everything quietly, quickly, every ugly detail. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then he said with a soft breath of disbelief, Ma'am, that's the wildest story I've heard in 20 years. What do you want me to do? Come anyway, I said. Act normal. Then read the owner's name out loud. He laughed a genuine, warm laugh. Happy to. When I hung up, adrenaline flooded my veins. Fear, yes, but also something fierce. Something steady. For the first time in weeks, I felt the ground tilt back toward me. The next day would be the beginning of the end. The morning of the appraisal felt unnaturally bright, the kind of sharp crystal sunlight that makes everything look too honest. I woke up before Ryan and Linda, heart pounding in a rhythm that wasn't fear anymore. Anticipation, maybe. Or the final stage of survival. I made coffee quietly, the way I used to before my home stopped being mine. The smell grounded me, bitter and warm, reminding me of nights when the only thing I had to worry about was freelance deadlines. At 9:12 a.m., Linda swept into the kitchen wearing a blazer far too formal for an appraisal. She looked like she was preparing for a press conference announcing her empire's expansion. Ryan, she called, ignoring me. He'll be here at 10. Make sure you're dressed appropriately. First impressions matter. Ryan came out moments later in a crisp, button-up shirt he hadn't worn since our engagement photos. He eyed my simple sweater and jeans with judgment. You're not changing? He asked. No, I said. I'm comfortable. He frowned. This is important. Important for whom, I wanted to ask. But I stayed silent. Silence was powerful when wielded deliberately. Linda spent the next 30 minutes staging the living room for Mark's visit. She fluffed pillows, my pillows. She moved coasters, my coasters. She placed a cheap vase filled with artificial flowers in the center of the dining table. Looks more expensive this way, she said proudly. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because the absurdity had finally crossed into something surreal. At 9:58 a.m., a knock sounded on the door. Linda practically glided across the room. Ryan straightened his shoulders, plastering on the confident smile he used when trying to impress people. I stayed seated on the sofa, quiet hands clasped tightly in my lap. Linda opened the door. Mark, so glad you could make it. He stepped inside, tall, salt and pepper hair with the easy professionalism of someone who'd seen too many messy domestic dramas to be surprised anymore. His eyes scanned the room, then flicked briefly to me. Morning, he said neutrally. Linda launched into her script immediately. As you can see, the property has great bones. We're considering purchasing it from the landlord, and Mark raised a hand politely. We'll get to that. I just need to follow procedure. Procedure. One word, but it made my pulse quicken. Because I knew what came next. He began walking around the apartment, clipboard in hand. Ryan shadowed him eagerly, pointing out features as if he'd personally installed them. The windows are original but well-maintained, Ryan said, voice too loud. And we're thinking about knocking down this wall open concept. You know, the place will look bigger once we got the kitchen. Got the kitchen. The kitchen I'd saved 3 years to upgrade. The kitchen I'd painted by hand on a Saturday while listening to old jazz. Linda chimed in, and of course, once it's ours, we'll swap out all the cheap fixtures. No offense to the landlord, he did his best. No offense. But the landlord didn't exist. Because the landlord was me. Mark nodded, pretending to jot notes, playing his role perfectly. He turned at last to the dining table where he'd placed his folder. Ryan and Linda hovered over him like predators stalking a kill. "All right," he said. "Before we talk renovation ideas, I need to verify something." Linda adjusted her necklace. "Of course. Ownership details. Right. We're already in talks with the landlord. They should be open to a fair offer." Mark opened the folder. "What I need to verify," he said slowly, "is the current legal owner of the property." Ryan grinned, obviously not us yet. "But once we make the offer," Mark cleared his throat. "According to county records, the sole owner is—" Silence fell like a curtain. He looked up, eyes shifting to me. "Emily Parker." The room froze. Ryan blinked. "What? That can't. There must be a mistake." Linda sputtered, No. She rents. "We've been living here under a lease." Mark tapped the paper. "Deed recorded. 3 years before this marriage. Sole ownership. No co-signers. No liens. No transfers." I stood. Slowly. Deliberately. Every nerve in my body hummed with something electric. Linda's face drained of color. Ryan looked like his jaw had unhinged. "You," he whispered. "You lied." "No," I said calmly. I protected myself. Linda shook her head like she was trying to rattle reality back into place. "You tricked my son. You tricked all of us." I met her eyes. "It's not my job to hand over everything I worked for just because you want it." Ryan stepped forward, voice cracking. "You hid this from me. You made me think I made you think nothing I said. You assumed ownership of something that never belonged to you." The fury rolled off him like heat. "You made me look stupid in front of everyone," he hissed. "You did that all by yourself." Linda slammed her hand on the table. "You ungrateful, manipulative little." Mark cut in gently. "I should go. Looks like you three have things to discuss." He slipped out quickly, leaving us in a silence so thick it felt physical. Ryan rounded on me. "You embarrassed me. You humiliated me." I kept my voice steady. "You tried to steal from me." He flinched. "I'm your husband, and I was your opportunity," I said. Linda pointed a shaking finger at me. "You don't deserve him. You don't deserve this apartment. You're a selfish—" "No," I said, stepping closer. "Selfish is using marriage as a shortcut to someone else's stability. Selfish is moving into a home you don't pay for and trying to flip it for profit. Selfish is thinking your desires override someone else's boundaries." Ryan's voice cracked. "You can't talk to my mother like that. I can talk to her exactly like this," I said, "because this is my home. And you two have taken enough." Linda laughed, a high, brittle sound. "You think this changes anything? Victor will eat you alive in court. You hid assets. Judges hate liars." I smiled then. A small, cold smile I didn't know I was capable of. "Good thing I documented everything." Ryan blinked. "Documented." I lifted my phone. Photos, screenshots, audio clips, statements, witness notes, police reports. "I told you," I said softly. I protected myself. Their faces crumbled. The moment hung in the air, suspended, a perfect breaking point. Then Linda snapped. Literally. She lunged toward a framed print on the wall, one of my favorites, and tried to rip it down. I stepped in front of her. "Don't touch my things." "This isn't your home," she screeched. "Yes," I said. "It is." Ryan grabbed Linda's shoulders, pulling her back. Mom, stop. We'll figure this out." She trembled, eyes wild. "You marry a woman with no family, no roots, and this is what happens. They hoard, they hide, they take." My voice turned ice cold. "I took nothing from you. You came into my life and tried to erase me." Ryan suddenly slammed his fist into the wall. The sound cracked through the apartment like thunder. I didn't flinch. "You ruined everything," he said. "You've destroyed this marriage. You destroyed it the moment you tried to take control of my life." His voice broke again. "I loved you." I shook my head. "No. You loved the idea of what I could give you." Silence again, or something like silence, the ringing after an explosion. Ryan whispered, "You'll regret this." I stepped back, lifting my phone again. "Threatening me. In my home?" His mouth snapped shut. Then a knock came at the door. Sharp, commanding. Zoe stepped in like a storm, dressed in a navy blazer. "Perfect timing," she said coolly. "Ryan Cole, Linda Cole. You've been served." She handed them legal documents, restraining order requests, evidence lists, housing protections. Linda ripped the envelope. This is ridiculous. You think some junior lawyer can actually... Zoe said Judge Brooks already reviewed the preliminary request. You'll need to vacate the property until the hearing. Ryan stared at her. That's impossible. Zoe tapped the stack. Want me to read the clause? I can. Linda's voice pitched. This is unlawful. What's unlawful? Zoe snapped as attempting to seize someone's premarital asset through deception and harassment. The room crackled with stunned silence. You have 48 hours, Zoe finished. Pack lightly. Linda looked like she might faint. Ryan looked like he might break something. I just breathed. For the first time in weeks, I inhaled fully. Zoe stepped beside me. You okay? I nodded. I will be. Ryan's voice broke one last time. You're choosing them over me, a judge, a lawyer, strangers. No, I said. I'm choosing me. He swallowed hard. You'll miss me. I met his eyes steady, unwavering. No, I said. I'll recover from you. His face twisted. Linda clutched his arm. Come on, we're leaving. She'll get what she deserves. And as they moved toward the hallway, I said quietly, I already did. The door closed behind them. The apartment was silent. A new kind of silence. The peaceful, sacred kind. I stood there in the middle of my living room, and felt a weight slide off my shoulders like a heavy coat being lifted. I didn't smile. Not yet. But something inside me shifted. A beginning. A reclamation. A spark of revenge not fueled by cruelty but clarity. Because the truth was simple, they thought they were taking everything from me. But all they did was hand me the weapon I needed to end this for good. The hours after they left, I felt unreal, like I was walking through the echo of a life I used to recognize. Their fingerprints were still everywhere, Linda's fake flowers in the trash, Ryan's cologne lingering in the hallway, a half-folded blanket draped over the sofa like a ghost of their entitlement. But the air itself felt different, lighter, uncoiled. I didn't cry. Not from relief, not from grief. There was no space for that yet. Instead, I opened every window in the apartment, letting the cold Seattle air flood in until goosebumps prickled along my arms. The breeze carried out their scent, their noise, their shadow. For the first time in weeks, I could hear the apartment breathe again, its old creaks, its soft hum, its quiet heartbeats syncing with mine. Zoe stayed with me that first night. She brought Thai food and her laptop, dropping both on the table with a thud. You need to sleep, she said. I need to think. I answered. She didn't argue. Zoe never argues when the wound is still fresh. She just sat beside me, our shoulders touching as we listened to the distant rain tapping against the windows like a familiar friend returning after a long absence. Around midnight, she asked, Do you want to read through the case details? No, I said. Not yet. Because something inside me had shifted so profoundly that words on a page couldn't keep up. I wasn't just preparing to defend myself anymore. I was preparing to reclaim myself. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual and walked into the living room barefoot. Sunlight streamed through the windows in warm beams, landing on the hardwood floors that had once made me cry from joy the day I moved in. I traced my fingers along the window frame, the kitchen counter, the back of the sofa. I whispered, You're mine again. It felt like a vow. But the quiet didn't last long. By noon, my phone buzzed with a blocked number. I didn't answer. Then came a voicemail. Ryan's voice dripping with false calm. Hey, just wanted to talk. Clear things up. We're both stressed. Maybe we can work something out. Work something out. As if this were a disagreement about dinner plans. An hour later, another voicemail from Linda. This one sharp enough to cut skin. You think you've won because some rookie judge took pity on you? The court won't stay on your side forever. Enjoy your little victory. It won't last. I deleted it without listening to the end. Zoe was in the kitchen reviewing audio files when she asked, You okay? I'm tired, I said, but not scared. She studied me for a long moment, then smiled, slow and proud. You know, most people break before reaching this point. I already broke, I said quietly. Now I'm rebuilding. She nodded. Good, because they haven't stopped fighting. And she was right. Over the next few weeks, paperwork piled up responses from Victor Blake, all venom disguised as legal prose. Phrases like entitled to spousal share and concealment of assets and marital entitlement filled pages designed to intimidate, not argue. But intimidation no longer worked on me. Instead, each letter sharpened my resolve. Each threat clarified the truth. Each lie they told about me only strengthened the foundation of what I needed to do next. Meanwhile, the apartment transformed again, slowly, deliberately. I repainted the living room a soft cream, rehung my artwork piece by piece, replaced the LED bulbs Linda installed with warm amber ones, bought new plants, healthier ones, ones that filled the room with green life that didn't apologize for taking up space. With every change, I felt myself returning. One night, as I unpacked a new throw blanket, there was a knock on the door, gentle, hesitant. Arthur. He stood there holding a small potted plant. I figured you could use a new start, he said softly. I almost cried then, not from pain, but from gratitude. Thank you, I whispered, for everything. He smiled sadly. My only regret, he said, is not speaking up sooner for my wife. I won't make that mistake again. His words settled inside me like a seed, because the truth was Ryan and Linda weren't done. Not even close. And neither was I. A week later, a thick envelope arrived, this time addressed to all residents of the apartment building. Inside was a notice about noise complaints filed by Ryan and Linda against me. Zoe read it, snorted, and tossed it aside. They're building a false narrative. Again. But we're 10 steps ahead. She was right. Between police reports, Arthur's testimony, witness statements, photos, audio clips, and their own arrogant behavior, their strategy was unraveling faster than they could stitch it together. But my revenge, if you could call it that, wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't about ruining them. It was about revealing them. And then letting the truth do what truth always does: expose, erode, undo. One evening I sat by the window watching the rain blur the city lights. The same kind of rain that fell the day I met Ryan. Back then the world felt romantic, full of possibility. Now it felt sharp, cleansing. I whispered to the glass, "You can't take back a lie, but you can choose what comes after it." And what came after for me was simple: peace, control, clarity. But for Ryan and Linda, that part wasn't up to me. A month later, an envelope arrived addressed to Linda but delivered to my mailbox by mistake. I opened it without thinking, then froze. It was a debt collection notice. Large amount. Overdue. Final warning. My breath steadied. They weren't winning. They weren't rebuilding. They were unraveling. I placed the letter on the counter carefully, almost gently. Not out of malice, out of understanding. Some storms you don't need to fight. You just step out of the way and let them run their course. And as I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my new sofa watching raindrops slide down the window, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not triumph, not vengeance. Something else. Power. Quiet, steady power. The kind that comes from knowing you survived people who expected you to crumble. The kind that comes from holding a truth sharp enough to protect yourself. The kind that whispers, they thought they broke you, but all they did was teach you how to fight. And maybe, just maybe, they handed you the one weapon you needed to end the story on your terms. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own home or fought quietly to protect something everyone else tried to take from you, hit subscribe. Stories like mine aren't rare, they're just rarely spoken out loud. And if you stayed with me until now, trust me, the next chapter is coming. Healing isn't a straight line, and neither is justice. So stick around, share this with someone who needs strength today, and tell me in the comments what part hit you the hardest. This story isn't over. Not for me. And maybe not for you either.